Why Crusaders Went Completely Insane. You want to know why the Crusaders went completely insane. Not just angry, not just zealous, but screaming at the gates of heaven, eating their own horses, wading through rivers of blood insane. The kind of insane that makes a man look at a city of 100,000 souls and see not people, but a stage for the apocalypse. The kind of insane that makes a knight fall to his knees in a church made of skulls and weep with joy. The answer is not simple. It is a poison cocktail of starvation, terror, apocalyptic fever, deliberate psychological manipulation, and a profound, agonizing sense of cosmic abandonment. To understand the madness of the Crusader, you cannot look at him as a soldier. You must look at him as a man who has been promised that the very laws of physics will bend to his faith, and then, when they do not, he must either break or become something inhuman. Let us begin in the dust. Not in Jerusalem, not in Antioch, but in the hearts of peasants in France and Germany in the year 1095. For months, Pope Urban II has been moving through the countryside, and his words are not sermons. They are psychic explosives. He tells the poor, the desperate, the landless knights that Christ himself has been insulted. The Holy Sepulchre, the very rock where God touched the earth, is in the hands of infidels. And God, Urban says, has chosen them, not kings, not emperors, but the rabble, the second sons, the broken men, to take it back. And here is the first crack in the collective mind. The promise of direct, immediate, mathematical salvation. Urban decrees that any man who takes the cross, who sews a crude cross of cloth onto his shoulder, will have a plenary indulgence. This is not a metaphor. In the medieval mind, sin is a debt. You owe God pain, suffering, time in purgatory. The crusade is not a war. It is a bank transfer. One drop of blood shed in the East is worth 1,000 years of penance in the West. Kill a Muslim, save your soul. Die on the road, bypass purgatory entirely, go straight to the throne of God. Think about what that does to a brain. If you are a serf who has been told your whole life that you are worthless, that your suffering is your lot, that God is a distant, terrifying judge, and then a pope tells you that violence is the currency of grace, that the more you butcher, the holier you become. That is not religion. That is a psychosis induction machine. And the people believed it, not because they were stupid, but because they were hungry. The year 1095 had seen famine and pestilence. The feudal system offered no future. A peasant in the Rhineland had a choice: starve slowly in a mud hut, or walk to Jerusalem and be fed by God. Because that was the promise, wasn't it? God would provide. The rivers would part. The walls of Jerusalem would fall like Jericho. So they left. Not armies, avalanches. The People's Crusade, before the real nobles even gathered, was a river of humanity. Men, women, children, old nuns clutching relics, shepherds leading flocks, a goose allegedly filled with the Holy Spirit. They marched east, singing hymns, convinced that the Mediterranean Sea would dry up before them. It did not. This is where the first wave of madness transforms from fervor into clinical psychosis. They reach the Danube. No miracle. They reach Belgrade. The local Byzantine commander, seeing this horde of starving, singing lunatics, panics and refuses them entry. They are forced to sack a town just to eat. Then they reach Hungary. Then they reach the real enemy, themselves. At Merciven, the Turkish archers do not fight like Europeans. They do not charge. They ride, shoot, vanish, reappear. The Crusader knights, heavy in their mail, exhausted, dehydrated, watch their horses die under them. The peasant army is slaughtered to the last child. Thousands are sold into slavery. This is not supposed to happen. God promised victory. Where is God? When God does not show up, the human mind does one of two things. It collapses into despair, or it redefines reality. The survivors, and the later better organized armies under Bohemond, Godfrey, and Raymond, chose the latter. They decided that God had shown up. The defeat was not a failure of divine power. It was a failure of their own purity. They were not holy enough. So the madness deepened. It turned inward. The journey across Anatolia in 1097 is a geography of hell. The summer sun bakes the stones so hot that men's shoes melt. The water sources are often poisoned corpses thrown into wells by the retreating Turks. Knights begin to slice open the bellies of their own pack animals, not to eat the meat, but to drink the foul fluid in the stomach. Men's lips crack and bleed, their tongues swell, they begin to see things. The shimmering heat plays tricks. A rock becomes a Saracen, a mirage becomes a river of wine, then it becomes a river of blood. They start to die, not in battle, from thirst. A bishop falls off his mule and is too weak to stand. His chaplain kneels beside him, praying. The bishop looks up and says, "I see angels." The chaplain sees only flies on his master's eyes. The bishop dies within the hour. They leave him on the side of the road. There is no time for burial. The living must keep walking toward the city of God. By the time they reach the walls of Antioch in October 1097, they are not an army. They are a hallucination of an army. And Antioch does not fall. It is a Roman fortress, a city of 400 towers, walls so thick that catapults bounce off them like pebbles. The Crusaders do not have enough men to surround it. They settle in for a siege, and winter arrives. This is the true heart of the madness. The siege of Antioch lasts 8 months. 8 months of rain, mud, and starvation. The Chronicle of Raymond of Aguilera, a priest who was there, describes men eating dogs, rats, the hides of their shields, boiled in water. They eat thorns. They eat the dung of horses. And then when that runs out, they eat the dead. It starts quietly. A man dies in his tent from dysentery. His friends, too weak to dig a grave, cover him with stones and go back to their posts. The next morning the stones have been moved, flesh stripped from the bones. They do not speak of it, but everyone knows. A knight named Peter the Alcoholic, his real nickname, is caught cutting a slice from the buttock of a dead Turk. He is not punished. He is asked for a share. This is not metaphor. This is the collapse of the human self. The boundary between man and beast dissolves. When you have eaten a human thigh, your relationship to the concept of enemy changes. You cannot go back to being a simple soldier. You are now something else. You are a cannibal for Christ. And once you have crossed that line, what crime is too great? What atrocity is beyond you? The leaders know they are losing control. Bohemond, the Norman prince, a man with ice water in his veins, sees that the army is about to either dissolve or explode. He needs a miracle. He cannot wait for God to send one, so he manufactures one. In June 1098, a low-level monk named Peter Bartholomew comes to the leaders with a story. He says St. Andrew appeared to him in a dream. The apostle led him to the floor of the Cathedral of St. Peter in Antioch, beneath the altar. There, buried in the dirt, is the holy lance, the very spear that pierced the side of Christ on the cross. Whoever carries this lance into battle cannot be defeated. Now here is the genius of madness. The leaders know it is fake. Later, Adhemar of Lapuy, the papal legate, will openly doubt it. But they don't care. The army needs a delusion, so they dig. They dig all night by torchlight, a crowd of weeping, skeletal fanatics screaming prayers. And wouldn't you know it, in the dirt, they find a rusted piece of iron. Is it a Roman spearhead? Probably. Is it the Lance of Destiny? It doesn't matter. The army believes, and the effect is instantaneous. The psychology of a starving mob flips on a single point. The day after the discovery, they march out of Antioch to face Kerboga's massive relief army. They are outnumbered 10-1. They are so weak that many cannot lift their swords. But they are no longer hungry men, they are apostles. They carry the spear of Christ. And the Turkish army, watching these gaunt, weeping, singing wraiths stagger toward them, does something inexplicable. They panic. They break. They run. Why? Not because of the lance, because the Turks, too, had been watching the siege. They knew the Crusaders were eating their own dead. They knew these were not normal men. And when you see an enemy who should be dead, who has no reason to stand, let alone charge, you realize you are not fighting humans. You are fighting something broken. Something that has no fear of death, because death has become a friend. The Turks were sane. Insanity cannot defeat insanity. It can only flee from it. So Antioch falls, but the madness does not end. It festers. The Crusaders, still starving, still trapped in the city Kerboga had been outside, but now they are inside with no food, start to turn on the locals. They butcher the Muslim and Jewish inhabitants of Antioch. They butcher Christian Greeks. They suspect of treachery. They butcher anyone with fat on their bones. And then the ultimate collapse. The cannibalism goes public. At Meera, a nearby town, the Crusaders find grain stores, but it's not enough. They begin to roast the bodies of dead Turks on spits. The Chronicle of Fulcher of Chartres records it with a shudder. Our people boiled the pagan adults in cooking pots and impaled children on spits and devoured them. A priest named Rodolphe of Caen writes, "We cut open the bellies of the dead, for they were said to have swallowed gold coins. And when we found none, we ate the flesh." Stop for a moment. Imagine the smell, the smoke of human fat, the sound of grown men weeping as they chew, because they know it is a sin, but they are so hungry. And then imagine the theological justification. A bishop declares the Saracens are not human. They are the spawn of the devil. To eat their flesh is to consume evil itself, to purify the world. Madness has found its language. It always does. By the time the remnants of the army, now reduced from 100,000 to perhaps 12,000, stumble toward Jerusalem in the spring of 1099, they are no longer a religious movement. They are a death cult. They have been marching for 3 years. They have watched their children die of dysentery. They have eaten their pack animals, their dogs their own dead. They have been promised a miracle 12 times, and each time the miracle was just barely enough to keep them from killing each other. And now they see the city. The dome of the rock glitters in the distance. The walls of Jerusalem, the same walls that have repelled armies for 1,000 years, rise up 30 feet high, topped with archers. The Fatimid governor, Iftikhar al-Dawla, has poisoned the wells outside the city, cut down all the trees. and driven out the Christian population so there are no sympathizers inside. He knows what is coming. He has heard the rumors of Me'era. The Crusaders arrive on June 7th, 1099. They do not have enough ladders. They do not have enough rope. They have no siege towers, no mangonels, nothing. They simply stand there, 12,000 starving madmen, looking at the wall that separates them from the tomb of their god. And they do something strange. They weep. They fall to their knees. They crawl toward the walls on their hands and knees, kissing the rocks. They strip off their armor and walk barefoot in sackcloth around the city walls, singing psalms, while the Muslim defenders on the battlements jeer and throw down dung. It is not a battle tactic. It is a psychotic break. They are reenacting the Passion of Christ. They believe that if they humble themselves enough, if they suffer enough, the walls will fall like Jericho. The walls do not fall. The first assault on June 13th is a disaster. They bring a single ladder. It breaks. Men fall, break their legs, and lie in the moat, crying for water. The archers on the wall pick them off one by one. The Crusaders retreat, and for a week, they do nothing. They sit in the dust. They look at the city. They begin to argue. Should they give up? Should they go home? There is no home to go back to. That world is gone. They have been monsters for so long that they have forgotten how to be farmers, how to be fathers. They only know how to march and die and eat. The leaders know they have one chance. They need a miracle, but they also need wood. They send a detachment to Samaria, cut down every tree they find, and build 2 massive siege towers. It takes 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, the army begins to hallucinate again. A meteor falls in the Turkish camp, and the Crusaders claim it is a divine sign. A priest sees the ghost of Adamar, who had died at Antioch, rising from the ground and blessing the towers. A woman in the camp gives birth to a child with 2 heads. They kill the child and smear its blood on the wheels of the siege tower. For luck. On the night of July 13th, they roll the towers to the walls. The battle lasts 2 days. It is not a battle, it is a frenzy. Knights fight without helmets. Priests throw rocks. A woman named Margaret, a camp follower, climbs the wall before any knight and plants a cross on a battlement. She is immediately shot through the throat. They keep climbing. The defenders pour burning oil. They throw Greek fire. The Crusaders scream the name of Jesus and keep coming. At noon on July 15th, a knight named Ludolf of Tournai is the first to step onto the wall. He is not a great warrior. He is just the one who did not stop. Behind him, the flood. The gates are opened. The Crusaders pour into Jerusalem. And now, the final transformation. The madness reaches its absolute, terrifying apex. For 3 years, they have been promised salvation. For 3 years, they have starved, eaten human flesh, watched their friends die, been told that God would reward their suffering, and now, at last, they have the city, the holy city, the place where Christ's blood soaked into the stones. They do not take prisoners. The chronicles are not exaggerating. They kill everyone. They kill men, women, children, infants, the elderly, the sick. They kill Muslims. They kill Jews who had taken refuge in their synagogues. They kill Eastern Christians who look too Arab. They kill until their swords are dull. Then they kill with axes, with hammers, with rocks, with their bare hands. In Temple Mount, the slaughter is so deep that the blood runs down the steps and pools in the streets. A chronicler named Raymond of Aguilera the same priest who had faithfully recorded the cannibalism at Meera, writes this: "Men rode in blood up to their knees and bridle reins. It was a just and wonderful judgment of God." Read that again. A just and wonderful judgment of God. That is not a man describing an atrocity. That is a man who has redefined blood as holy water. His brain has flipped a switch. Where you or I see a murdered infant, he sees a sacrifice. Where we see a pool of gore, he sees a baptismal font. He has gone so far into the logic of holy violence that there is no way back. He is insane. But his insanity is systematic. It is the logical end of a 3-year journey that began with a pope promising salvation for blood. The most terrible detail comes from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. After the massacre, when the knights are exhausted, covered in gore, they do something remarkable. They wash their hands. They take off their bloody armor. They walk barefoot in white robes to the tomb of Christ. And they kneel, and they pray, and they weep. They weep not for the people they have killed, but for joy, because they believe they have finally, after 3 years of hell, been saved. Let me tell you what a clinical psychologist would say about that moment. He would say that the Crusaders have undergone a complete moral disengagement. Their empathy has been destroyed by prolonged trauma and starvation. Their sense of reality has been replaced by a psychotic belief system. They exhibit the classic symptoms of a shared delusional disorder, a folie a millions. And the weeping? That is not sorrow. That is the release of 3 years of unbearable cognitive dissonance. They had been told that violence was grace. They committed the violence. They saw rivers of blood. And instead of concluding that the Pope was wrong, they concluded that the blood proved the Pope was right. That is the logic of madness. It is perfect, airtight, and utterly inhuman. But we are not done, because the madness does not end in Jerusalem. It cannot end. Once you have eaten the flesh of your enemy, once you have waded through the blood of children, once you have heard a priest call a massacre wonderful, you cannot simply put down your sword and become a pilgrim. You are now a different kind of creature. You are a crusader. And so the survivors of the First Crusade spend the rest of their lives in a state of permanent low-grade psychosis. They settle the Holy Land. They build castles. They marry Armenian wives. They have children. But they never stop fighting, because the fighting is the only thing quiets the screaming in their heads. They form military orders, the Templars, the Hospitallers, whose members take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience to violence. They become machines. They fight until they die. Because if they ever stop, if they ever sit in silence and think about what they did at Meera and Jerusalem, they would have to face the truth that God did not save them, that they were not holy, that they were just starving, terrified animals who tore each other apart and called it a miracle. And that truth would kill them, not the body, the soul. So they choose the madness. They choose to believe. They build a kingdom of blood and call it Outremer, beyond the sea. They live in a dream, and in that dream they are heroes. But the dream has a nightmare logic of its own, because the Crusaders' madness is contagious. The Muslims they slaughtered do not forget. A man named Saladin, a boy at the time of the First Crusade, grows up with the stories of what these madmen did. He learns to hate not just the Crusaders, but the very idea of a holy war. And 88 years later, when Saladin retakes Jerusalem, he does not slaughter the inhabitants. He lets them go for ransom because he is sane. And he knows that sanity is the only weapon that can truly defeat the madness. He offers mercy. And the Crusaders, seeing mercy, do not understand it. They call it weakness. They launch more crusades, the second, the third, the fourth, where they will abandon Jerusalem entirely and instead sack a Christian city, Constantinople, for money. By the time the Fourth Crusade rolls around in 1204, the original madness has metastasized. The Crusaders who land at Venice have no money to pay the Venetians for ships. The Venetian Doge, an old blind man named Enrico Dandolo, makes them an offer. Attack Zara, a Christian city on the Adriatic, and he'll forgive the debt. They do it. The Pope excommunicates them. They don't care. The excommunication is just paperwork. They have already been absolved by the blood of 1 million victims. What is one more pope? Then they go to Constantinople. They don't intend to sack it. But the Byzantine emperor reneges on a deal. The Crusaders, trapped, starving again, feel the old madness rising. They look at the greatest city in Christendom, the golden domes, the marble palaces, the libraries full of ancient texts, and they see not a fellow Christian capital, but a rival, a city that failed to support their holy war, a city that made deals with the devil, a city that, in their fevered minds, deserves what happened to Jerusalem. For 3 days, they sack Constantinople. They piss on the altar of Hagia Sophia. They put a prostitute on the patriarch's throne and make her sing. They melt down ancient Greek statues for coins. They drink communion wine until they vomit. And when it is over, they carve up the empire and laugh. A French knight writes home, "The Greeks are not our brothers. They are dogs. And we have taught them what happens to dogs who defy the cross. That is the final stage of the madness, the complete loss of the distinction between self and other, between Christian and enemy, between holy and unholy." The Crusader began with a cross on his shoulder, seeking forgiveness. He ended with a sword in a nun's belly, calling it justice. And the terrifying thing is, he believed it. He truly believed it. Because belief, once it is no longer tethered to reality, becomes a closed loop. It feeds on itself. It grows stronger with every atrocity. The more you kill, the more you need to kill to prove that the killing was right. So why did the Crusaders go completely insane? They went insane because they were asked to do the impossible. They were asked to walk across the world, fight an enemy they did not understand, conquer cities that could not be conquered, and do it all in the name of a God who remained silent. They were starved, terrified, lied to, and abandoned. And in the face of that unbearable contradiction, the promise of divine love and the reality of human suffering, they chose to break. They chose to believe that the blood was holy. They chose to believe that the cannibalism was communion. They chose to believe that the screams of dying children were angels singing, because the alternative, the truth, was that they had killed, eaten, and died for nothing. And no human mind can bear that truth. So the mind does the only thing it can. It rewrites the truth. It makes the horror sacred. It looks at a pool of blood and sees a miracle. And that, more than any battle or siege, is the true insanity of the Crusades. It is a madness that still lives. It lives wherever a man believes that violence can be holy. It lives wherever a soldier looks at a corpse and feels not horror, but pride. It lives wherever a priest blesses a bomb. The Crusaders are long dead, their bones are dust. But their disease, the beautiful, terrible, seductive madness of absolute certainty, is still walking the earth, and it is still hungry.